Specialist, if you're finished clacking away at your little reports, the adults are trying to prevent a war, the room, a sterile tactical operations center humming with the low drone of servers, rippled with a wave of condescending chuckles. Captain Eva Rostova, sharp, arrogant, and visibly stressed, stood with her hands on her hips, her glare fixed on the unassuming figure at the clerk's terminal. Specialist Anya Sharma didn't look up. She didn't flinch. Her fingers continued their steady, almost meditative dance across the keyboard, the quiet clicks a stark contrast to the captain's abrasive tone. Her posture was perfect, her focus absolute, a small island of calm in a rising sea of panic. In the back of the room, away from the holographic map displaying blinking red icons, Colonel Thorne watched, his gaze bypassing the frantic analysts and their celebrated captain. He wasn't looking at the main screen displaying the unbreakable enemy signal. He was watching the specialist's hands, observing the impossibly fluid rhythm, and a long dormant memory flickered in his mind. He saw a pattern not of administrative work, but of something else entirely, something disciplined, complex, and profound. If you believe competence is quieter than ego, type silence below. The source of Captain Rostova's ire was a ghost. An encrypted enemy transmission, a tight beam data burst that was, by all accounts, perfect. It was wrapped in a quantum-generated one-time pad, the holy grail of secure communication, theoretically impossible to crack without the key. For 6 agonizing hours, Rostova's team of elite SIGINT analysts had thrown every decryption algorithm in their arsenal at it, only to watch them shatter against a wall of pure mathematical noise. The message was a dagger aimed at their fleet, and they were blind to its target. The pressure was immense, a physical weight in the room that made the air thick and the coffee bitter. Rostova, a prodigy from the academy who built her career on intellectual superiority, was failing publicly. Her insults directed at Sharma were not just cruelty. They were a desperate deflection from her own powerlessness. She saw a low-ranking clerk, a paper pusher, a nobody, and made her the target of a frustration that had nowhere else to go. To Rostova, Sharma was just part of the background, a functionary whose only job was to record the failures of her betters. She made the classic mistake of the arrogant. She judged the book by its cover, assuming the simple uniform reflected a simple mind. The crisis deepened. A new fragment of data arrived, a supplementary packet that only confirmed the message's imminent threat. Panic began to fray the edges of the team's professionalism. Voices became strained. Rostova snapped orders, her commands growing more erratic. It was in this moment of rising chaos that Sharma's rhythmic typing ceased. For the first time, she looked up, her gaze not on the furious captain but on a secondary diagnostic monitor that displayed the raw data stream, the chaotic, meaningless cascade of ones and zeros that had defeated the station's supercomputer. Her expression remained placid, but her eyes, deep and analytical, were tracing patterns invisible to everyone else. With an economy of motion that was almost unnerving, she slid her keyboard to the side, pulled a small, unmarked data slate from her bag, and connected it to a port on her console. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't announce her intention. The action was so quiet, so devoid of drama, that only Colonel Thorne seemed to notice. Her fingers began to move again, but this time, not on her standard keyboard. They flew across the surface of the slate, her movements a blur of practiced, methodical precision. The room held its breath, the focus shifting from the main screen to the lone specialist. Rostova finally noticed, her face contorting with fury. "What in the hell do you think you're doing, specialist? Get your unauthorized hardware off my network now." But her command was lost, swallowed by a sudden, sharp chime from Sharma's terminal. On the main holographic display, the wall of encrypted gibberish shuddered. Lines of nonsensical characters began to rearrange themselves, slowly, then with accelerating speed, like a puzzle solving itself from the inside out. Sharma wasn't breaking the code with brute force. She was doing something far more elegant. She had ignored the encryption itself and focused on the carrier wave, on the infinitesimal, human-made imperfections in the signal's timing. She found the ghost in the machine, the signature of the operator, the subtle, rhythmic fingerprint of a human hand on a transmitter key. It was a flaw no machine could find because it was a flaw of biology, not mathematics. A single, Perfect line of plain text blinked into existence at the top of the screen. Decryption complete then. The rest of the message filled the space below. A list of coordinates, target designations, and a launch time set for T-minus 30 minutes. A wave of stunned, deafening silence crashed over the room. Rostova stood frozen, her mouth agape, the color drained from her face. The words on the screen were an undeniable, impossible truth that shattered her entire perception of the situation. Her team of experts, her millions of dollars in technology, her own vaunted intellect, all had failed. A clerk, a quiet, unassuming specialist who typed reports had succeeded. No, she whispered, the word a fragile puff of disbelief. That's not possible. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the calm, measured steps of Colonel Thorne as he walked from the back of the room to stand behind Sharma. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture of profound respect. He looked not at the decoded message, but at Sharma, who was already disconnecting her slate, her work done. Then, Thorne turned his gaze to the stunned captain. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the tension with the finality of a judge's gavel. "Captain Rostova," he said, his tone layered with cold disappointment. "Assumptions are the enemy of intelligence. You should know that." He then tapped a command into the main console, pulling up the station's personnel files. He typed in a single name, Sharma, Anya. The file that appeared was almost entirely blank, a sea of black redactions and classified markers. There was no photo, no service history, no list of previous assignments. But at the very bottom, there was one line of text left untouched, a single entry under unit designation. Colonel Thorne leaned in, reading it aloud for the entire room to hear. Unit, Project Chimera. Disbanded. He paused, letting the name hang in the air. The older analysts in the room exchanged wide-eyed looks of disbelief. Project Chimera was a myth, a legend from the Cold War, a clandestine group of savant-level cryptanalysts who were said to be able to break any code by hand, seeing patterns in the chaos that even computers missed. They were ghosts, digital phantoms recruited for their unique minds, and then erased from the records. Thorne continued, his voice resonating with authority. Specialty, human factor algorithmic analysis. Status, active reserve, deep cover. He looked directly at Rostova, whose face had gone from shock to a deep, burning shame. Specialist Sharma doesn't type reports, Captain, he stated, his voice dropping to an almost reverent whisper. She reads the silences between the words. She was never typing. She was listening. The story of what happened in the TOC that day spread like wildfire, not through official channels, but through the hushed, informal network of barracks gossip and late-night whispers. It became a legend, a cautionary tale for arrogant young officers, and an inspirational myth for the overlooked and underestimated. They called her the Ghost Key, the quiet clerk who could unlock any secret. The name was spoken with a mixture of awe and reverence. The incident fundamentally changed the culture of the intelligence wing. The focus shifted from a blind reliance on technology to a renewed appreciation for the human element, for the intuition and insight that no machine could replicate. The quiet ones, the observers, the methodical thinkers who had been previously dismissed as support staff, were suddenly seen in a new light. Their opinions were sought, their observations valued. The hierarchy of ego was replaced by a hierarchy of competence, where the validity of an idea mattered more than the rank of the person who spoke it. The change was palpable, a quiet revolution sparked by a single act of silent brilliance. Captain Rostova was not disciplined in any official capacity, but her public humbling was a far more profound punishment. The sharp edges of her arrogance were ground down, replaced by a quiet, thoughtful humility. The day after the incident, she approached Specialist Sharma's desk, not with an order or a sneer, but with a simple, direct request. "Show me," she said, her voice stripped of its former confidence. "Show me how you did it." Sharma, without a word, simply slid a chair over to her terminal. For weeks, the two sat side by side. The celebrated captain became the student of the quiet specialist. Sharma taught her not about algorithms or processing power, but about patterns. She taught her to see the person behind the code, to find the humanity in the machine. She never spoke of her past, never mentioned Project Chimera. Her instruction was as minimalist and precise as her actions had been that day. Rostova, for her part, absorbed every lesson with a newfound respect. She learned that true intelligence wasn't about knowing all the answers, but about being humble enough to recognize the one person in the room who did. Years passed. Colonel Thorne retired, and Captain Rostova, now a major, commanded the entire intelligence division. Her leadership style was a testament to the lesson she had learned. It was collaborative, respectful, and always prioritized skill over status. Specialist Sharma was gone. Having vanished back into the quiet anonymity from which she came, her official records once again scrubbed clean. But her legacy was permanent, woven into the very fabric of the institution. A new training module was now mandatory for all incoming SIGINT analysts. It was a course in heuristics, pattern recognition, and cognitive bias, designed to teach them to look beyond the data. They called it the Sharma Protocol. On the wall of the main training hall, a simple, framed plaque was hung. It didn't bear a name or a photograph. It just held a single, short sentence etched in brass. Listen to the silence. It was a constant reminder that the most critical information is often not in the noise, but in the spaces between. It was a testament to the quiet professional who had saved them all without ever raising her voice. True strength is not measured in volume, but in impact. True competence requires no announcement, for its results speak with a clarity that drowns out all boasting. In a world that constantly rewards the loudest voice in the room, it is the quiet professional, the one who focuses on the work and not the credit, who builds a legacy worthy of respect. Anya Sharma's story became a pillar of their institutional identity, a reminder that genius can be found in the most unassuming places, and that the greatest threats are not defeated by arrogance or anger, but by a calm, focused, and undeniable display of mastery. The echoes of her quiet keystrokes were more powerful than any shouted command, a permanent lesson that true authority is not claimed, but demonstrated. It is earned in the silence, in the methodical pursuit of excellence, and it is proven when the impossible becomes reality. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud ignorance, and where silent discipline defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.